Today we'll be ranking the MCU's versions of the Eternals. And just getting this out of the way right now, I'm ranking each Eternal just based on my opinion, characterization, powers, personality, just overall vibe essentially. It's all just my opinion. I'm not the right answer. And with that being said, let's move on to number 10. So number 10 is going to be Sprite. First of all, her motivations towards the end, towards the finale of the movie just weren't concrete or compelling enough for me to side with her. I just didn't really understand what she was really going for. Another thing is that her dialogue overall just kind of annoyed me, or at least the execution of it. This is like a world-ending event, and just I understand she's a kid and she's supposed to be kind of bratty, but I just couldn't really tolerate the way she behaved in regards to everything that was going on in the movie. And then finally, with her powers, I can't really think of a single time where her powers were really that useful, especially at the end when she's fighting Cersei and she's creating like 5 or 6 volcanoes. Like, what was the point of that? Cersei already saw the original one. Were you going to blindfold her or something? Like, I don't see the plan there, Sprite. Number 9 is going to be Ajak. So she's the leader of the Eternals, but she's also incredibly passive, and that's what I don't really like about her. Plus, I feel like her motivations, much like Sprite, her motivations for turning on a dime against her original mission just wasn't that strong, because I understand that she learned to appreciate humans over the years, but we're just told that, essentially. Let's say she was in New York for some reason and one of the Avengers saved her. I can understand that. It's like show don't tell, basically. And then also she died in a really cruddy way for an Eternal to die. I have no reason to root for her, basically. Number 8 is going to be Druid. As opposed to Sprite, I actually really like the way that he utilized his powers in the movie. With his people shooting at the deviants all in sync and just him using them as expendable. I found that very cool and interesting. I also really like the conflict between him wanting to use his powers and being told not to. Honestly, I came into the movie wanting to hate Druid, but I came out of the movie actually really liking him. So congrats on you, Druid, for being number 8. I just gravitate more towards like flashier characters. That's just my only thing against him. And number 7 is going to be Thena. As opposed to a lot of people, I think I find Thena's characterization much more compelling than her actual powers, because I find her powers to be more like limited Green Lantern powers, or maybe even more lacking than Fastus's powers, which I'll get into later. But in terms of her character, I really enjoy the idea of the Mad Weary. I think it's cool that her memories are just overloading her and she's going insane. And she played the character, or played the role of the unstable, team member that's also morally solid. Because you know who that is? That's Bruce Banner. That's the Hulk, really. He's one of the strongest players on the team, but he's also really unreliable because he can turn on the team. Number 6, I mentioned Fastus, and here he is. I just found Fastus a lot more human than a lot of the rest of the Eternals, who seem to be just disjointed from humanity. And touching upon powers again, name something in terms of powers that Thena can do that Fastos can't. Like, Thena can make a spear. I'm sure Fastos can make a spear. Fastos, I believe during that final battle, he's just making weapons on the fly. And I find that a lot more interesting than just like thinking of whatever weapon you want. It's like, Thena, I want a spear, there's my spear. Where it's like, Fastus, he actually has to construct it. Like, it seems more like a hassle or a hindrance, but just think of all the things that he could create. I just find Fastus's powers more interesting, at least in terms of how they were depicted. I found them just cooler to look at on screen, basically. And in a way, when you think about it, Fastus is the most important Eternal too, in terms of the Celestials' mission, because he's the one that's progressing humans, along, basically, and that's the whole goal, right? Just breaking into my top 5 is going to be Kingo. I don't have a toy of him, but I really enjoy Kingo as a character. And like I said in my review, the scene where he turns on Icarus is just my favorite scene in the movie because it's so heartbreaking. But on the other hand, I also find his powers very redundant, especially when he's standing right next to Icarus, who could just look at something and shoot it. Meanwhile, Kingo actually has to aim and somewhat charge up his powers. And then a lot of people enjoy Kingo because he's like the comic relief of the movie. I don't really see it that way, maybe because I just don't find Eternals to be that funny of a movie, so I don't really care about a comic relief character. But yeah, that's Kingo for me. Number 4 is going to be Cersei. Now, on paper, I didn't find Cersei's powers too interesting, but when it was depicted in the movie, I found them very cool and very visually pleasing. Like when she defensively turns the bus into roses or turns the boulders into like flower petals or butterflies or whatever. And aside from that, is it bad to say that I just find Cersei likable? Like, I don't really have a good explanation for it. I guess another explanation would be because she's the foil to Icarus, and those two are both the extremes of the argument of the movie, and I just enjoy seeing the extreme perspectives. But like I said, I don't really have a good explanation for why I like Cersei. I just enjoy her character. Breaking into our top 3, we have Makari. Makari's just everyone's favorite character, really. I like to think of her as just Sprite done right, because she's kind of mischievous, but she's also incredibly powerful. She took on Icarus by herself. And aside from that, Makari is just really genuinely fun and just enjoyable to watch. Like, I'd want to hang out with her. Number 2 is going to be Gilgamesh, another person I don't really have a toy of. But I just like Gilgamesh because he's reliable. He's like this pillar that all the other characters gravitate towards and come to for their issues. That's why he's wifey material. Everyone else is dealing with problems. Like Icarus is dealing with his morality, and like Athena's dealing with like her mad weary and she might go crazy. Gilgamesh doesn't have any issues because he's too busy dealing with everyone else's issues. And that's why he's cool. And it also helps that he's insanely strong too. Like he beat Athena in one punch, and that's really cool. So here we are at the finale. Number 1 is Icarus. I'm not gonna lie, this is 100% bias, but this whole list is 100% bias, so I don't think it really matters. I personally I'm drawn to the most powerful / the leading characters in a movie, and Icarus is kind of both of those things in one. And as basic as his powers are, I really like the way they were depicted in the movie, just like how I was a fan of how all the powers were depicted in this movie. He fights differently than Superman, despite being like a Superman clone. He's a lot grittier, he's a lot more hands-on. And in terms of turning on his family, I'm not really a big fan of that, but on the other hand, it made the movie more interesting to me, because that last third of the movie where there's just conflict and drama between the Eternals internally, I just found that to be the best part of the movie. So thank you, Icarus, for making the movie a lot more interesting to me. And I can kind of get behind, his motivation. Like, obviously I'm not going to side with him, but, he's like a loyal soldier. He's just sticking to the plan. He's sticking to the mission. He's like, what the heck is everyone else doing, basically? And there you have it, my ranking of all 10 MCU Eternals. Let me know in the comments what you thought about my ranking, and let me know what your own ranking is, and it might actually influence my ranking, and that would be really cool, because I want to hear other people's opinions on it. Like and subscribe, and ring the bell notification if you enjoyed the content overall, and I post a video every week, so until then, I'll see you all later. Bye!